Hello, Anne. I'm so happy to have you today.
Hey, Justine. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
I am so excited to chat with you today. We're going to talk a lot about what you went through as a child because it's so important to talk about that because so far what I read about what you're doing is truly amazing. I was like looking you up yesterday and you're in a bunch of cool movies, by the way. I'm going to ask you
Thank
how
you.
to see a
Okay.
certain movie
Yeah.
because I'll ask you that later on. 'Cause I got to go check it out. From what you told me, your past with your father, you ran away. There was also moments where you were giving birth and you almost died. Like let's get into that. So let's talk
Okay.
about your childhood, your teen days. We want to just go like right into it.
Sure. Okay. So my parents got divorced when I was 2. And when I was about 10, there was a custody fight. And my dad ended up winning, but because we asked to live with him. And I think honestly, or at least in my case, it was because I felt less secure with my dad than I did with my mom.
Hmm.
And as soon as I had moved in, I realized that this was not a good situation for me. My dad was very authoritarian and very old fashioned. He was born in 1921. So he was like
Oh, wow.
literally old enough to be my grandpa. And he had some very old fashioned ideas about girls and their place and how they should act and all of that. And I was a wild child. And also, I mean, it really started because I wanted to move back in with my mom.
Hmm.
So we started having problems around that. And also, he would say things like, when I say jump, you don't ask how high, you ask, was that high enough? And I would just like, not going to do it. To my detriment, I would not do it. Like, back in the day, I'm 58. So back in the day, people hit their kids and stuff. And
Hmm.
I would not budge. It was like, you will get nothing out of me. I'm a stone. And
It's like don't tell me what to do. Pretty much, right?
yeah. And when my dad also had a lot of great qualities, and one of them was he had taught us how to drive. So he used to take us, driving when we'd go to the mall when it used to be closed on Sundays. And we would drive around the parking lots and practice parking and turning and all it reversing and all of that stuff. So I was pretty comfortable with my driving skills. So one day I'm spending the night at my mom's best friend's house, and she had a daughter who was a year and a half younger than I am, but we had grown up together. So she's more like a sister, maybe a sister is too much, but like a cousin, right? And we had heard about a party, and I was 14, and it was getting late. We had grabbed a bottle of wine from her mom somewhere, and we were drinking that. And then we were like, well, I want to go to this party. Let's go find out about the party. And so we took her mom's keys and we took the car and we were out on the road. Now it's pouring rain, pouring rain. It's dark. I mean, I'd only ever driven under the best of conditions, light of day, all of that kind of stuff, right? And I didn't know where I was going. And this was not, we didn't have GPS back then. So I make a wrong, I'm on this kind of like highway thing, and I want to go back the other direction. So I go into like I guess it's only for police officers. And so
Oh, goodness.
as I'm about to go around this thing, there's a police officer sitting there. So I'm like, oh shit. So I stop. Instead, I didn't keep going. I knew enough to stop. And I roll down my window and he says, okay, where are you going? I said, I'm lost, officer. I'm just trying to get back home. I don't want to be on the highway. And he said, how old are you? And I said, I'm 18. And he said, all right, well, get on home now. And so I roll up my window, look at my friend, I'm like, whew. So I'm driving, and it's pouring rain. And I don't know if this is video for your people, but I have my hand on the steering wheel, and I look over my shoulder. And as I look over my shoulder, I do this, right? I like turn the steering wheel as I'm looking
Hmm.
over my shoulder, and I realized I had done that, and I jerked it back to get back in the lane. And
Yeah,
he was behind me.
of course.
So then the lights go on, right? And he pulls me over and he's like, where's your license? Where's your registration? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, it's at home. And he's like, how old are you? And I said, I'm 16. So I'm getting 2 years young.
So you got
Right.
younger
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
you're going down the street.
Got younger. Exactly. And so he's like, all right, walk a straight line. And so I'm walking a straight line. And he's like, you're under arrest. And I was like, you can't arrest me. I'm only 14 years old.
Now you're
And
14. Oh my
yeah,
God, this is getting
yeah,
fun. I
yeah.
like this. I like this game.
So he takes us to juvenile detention. And I kept saying to my friend, like, don't you dare give him the satisfaction of your tears. That was always like
Mm-hmm.
my thing, right? That you get nothing from me. And so, cause she's trying, she's crying and I'm like, don't you dare, you pull yourself together. So anyway, we get to the jail and I wanted them to call my mother, not my father, who I was living with at the time. But my mom back then used to, like, if somebody called her in the middle of the night, she would just knock the phone off the hook. And so, or unplug it. So I'm sure that's what she did, because I was like, just try her again. Please, just try her again. And then they're like, okay, who else can we call? And then I had to give my dad's phone number. So my dad picked me up, and that was not fun. And he was angry, to say the least. And then a few months later, or whatever it was, I had to go to court for the joyride. And as I'm sitting in court, the judge is like, okay, for the matter of, I don't even remember what he called it, joyriding or whatever it was, your license will be suspended for 6 months. Now, for the matter of Alexander versus Alexander on the charge of incorrigibility, and I was like, what? Alexander versus Alexander. And I'm looking at my dad, and he won't look at me. He's in profile. And I was like, Dad, what is this? What's going on? And he's like, and he won't look at me. I said, what is incorrigible? I didn't know any of it. So that kind of led down an odyssey I ended up going to a boarding school for troubled teens. It was called DeSisto. It's closed down now. But there were two ways that you got to this boarding school. One was the courts sent you, instead of sending you to juvie, and these were the states where it was subsidized, or you came from a very wealthy home and it was paid for by your parents. And so there was like already these kids who were had done some serious crimes, and other kids who had gone joyriding for the first time, right? So it was like a very big divide. And yet we all got along, so that wasn't really the problem. But it was there was a lot of, we were allowed to smoke, we were allowed to swear. So we did a lot of both. I'm 14. But we did a lot of both. They never beat us, but my very first introduction to the school was, my mom had flown me up there, and she's trying to put on a brave face for me. And it was beautiful, the campus. Absolutely beautiful. It was in Massachusetts, in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, and it was just like picturesque at the base of a mountain, and there's, just rolling greens, and it was really beautiful. And I was coming there, I think it was towards the end of the school year, so I was supposed to spend the summer there. May have been like the first school vacation. It's a while ago. And as we're walking up to my dorm, and it's quiet, I don't see anybody, all of a sudden we hear this gut-wrenching scream. And this girl comes tearing around the corner. And 5 seconds later, this group of people comes tearing around the corner behind her. And they tackle her and they throw her down on the ground, and everybody's on one limb. Somebody's holding her head, and she's spread eagle on the ground, and she's screaming and screaming, and they're petting her, trying to calm her down, telling her, just let it out, just let it out, just let it out. And I look at my mom, and my mom looks at me, and, I had been court ordered to go there, and she had been court ordered to take me, so there was really nothing we could do. So that was my first introduction to it. Then, because I was a runaway risk, they had done this thing called leashing me, which meant that one person had to always be within arm's length of me, and they were responsible for everything I did. But it was one student, and I was triple leashed, meaning 3 students were always within arm's length of me and, were responsible for what I did. And I had met my roommate, and I liked her, but they didn't want to let me sleep down in my room where I had all my stuff, my comforter, my pillows, my posters, right? My mom had helped me fix that up. And so I was up in this other girls' room, and they had all been in boarding school together, so they knew each other really well, and they were really close. And so there were 2 girls in one bed. I'm in the other bed, and there's one girl on a mattress across the door. And they're they're giggling and having fun and just like, as girls do on a sleepover, basically, which is
Mhm.
kind of what it was for them. And their joy was just making me more and more miserable. And I didn't want them to see me cry. We've covered this.
Mhm.
So in a hurry, I could feel the tears coming. And so I was in a hurry to get out of the room. And I opened the door really quickly and I accidentally hit the girl on the floor in the head. And I didn't mean to do it, but now everybody's screaming, she's violent, she's violent. And everybody's sort of chasing after me. And I try calling my mom and they rip the phone out of my hand and hang it up, payphone. And I run down to my room and my original room and I kind of like close the door behind me and I'm, trying to catch my breath as I'm trying to keep people out. And of course, then, there was really nowhere for me to go. And I just jumped on my bed and I had very long hair back then as well. And I just kind of like let my hair fall around me like a curtain, like just trying to hide.
Mhm.
And the school was a Gestalt therapy school. So they're all kind of, and they were used to doing a lot of this kind of therapy stuff, but I wasn't. And so they're
Mhm.
all, on the bed and they're all kind of like moving my hair out of my face and, and like, oh, you're just a scared little girl and da 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 da. And these were girls my age telling me this. And I'm sure there was a dorm mother in there somewhere, but I don't remember her. And so I was at that school for a while. Then we had summer vacation coming up. And there were a couple of things that happened. One was I made friends, good friends, with a girl named Julie. And at the time, her dad was the ambassador in Switzerland. And the other thing was, I kept hearing about this girl named Mara, who her parents were giving her up for adoption. And Mara had been at the school previously and had left. And now the owner of the school, Michael DeSisto, was going to take her guardianship. And so I kept hearing about her. And as difficult as my relationship was with my dad, I couldn't imagine being given up for adoption at 15. That just was like, it makes me emotional now.
I've never even heard of something like
Yeah, just
that.
mind
I didn't even
blowing.
know that was even a thing. Like, you can do that?
So
That's traumatizing. That's
it was
horrible.
totally traumatizing. So I really had
Man.
like this empathy for her before I
Yeah.
even met her. And then she kind of shows up to the dorm and she knows a lot of the people because she had been there before. And she was beautiful on top of it. So I remember like just kind of being mesmerized by her. And meanwhile, vacation is getting closer and closer. And I just want to go home to my mom. But they weren't going to let me do that. And I called my dad to try and talk my dad into it. And he's like, no, absolutely not. And don't think you're coming here. I was like, don't think I want to go there. And so he's like, find a friend to go home with. So at this point, I'm talking to my best friend at the time, who was Julie. And she calls up her dad. And he's like, sure. If her dad pays the plane ticket, she can come stay with us for the summer, no problem. And my dad's like, am I allowed to swear on this?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. And my dad's like, are you fucking crazy? You think I'm going to send you to Switzerland? And so now it's like even closer to the summer vacation and maybe a day or two before it. And I really wasn't that close with anyone else. I'm kind of like I have very intense relationships with a small number of people, but I'm not like a butterfly with a large number.
Yeah.
And so I was going to be stuck there for the summer. And that first night, the dorms were pretty much empty. And I went outside to have a cigarette. And as I'm out there, Mara's out there. And it was the first time I had spoken with her. And I remember asking her, have you ever been to LA? California. Have you ever been to California? She's like, yeah, it's cool. I like it. And I said, well, you want to go again? And she said, okay. And so I said, great, I'll meet you here in 10 minutes. And so I ran upstairs. I don't even know if we packed a bag. I must have packed something. And I know I had $10.
I love the stories. I love it. This is going great.
And I came downstairs and she was waiting. And we crept across the grounds breaking all sorts of rules, right? Because you weren't
Mm-hmm.
allowed to go across this and go across that. You weren't allowed to leave the dorms after dark. All of these things, right? And we get to the road and we're trying to hitchhike. And every time she sees a car coming, she's diving into the bushes. I'm like, Mara, what are you doing? She's like, that's how they come. They're going to come for us with a van. I was like, well, we don't have a choice. We have to try and get out of here. Otherwise, they will get us. And so this kid on his paper route in a van stops it. She has dove into the woods, into the bushes again. And I'm like, it's safe. And so she like looks. And so we get into the van and the kid sparks up a joint, and we're sitting in the back or I'm sitting in the front and she's in and he hands us the joint. We're smoking and heading back in the direction that we had come from. All of a sudden, the kid turns into DeSisto. And
Turns
literally, into DeSisto was the name of the school.
Okay.
So he turns back into the campus and he literally drives up to the house of Michael DeSisto, who was the director, the owner, blah, blah, blah. And Mara is on the floor now at this point. He's like, what's the matter? She's like, I lost my contact. And so we're just like kind of worriedly looking at each other. And he casually gets out of the car, throws the newspaper, gets back in. He's like, where to? And so we drive out. He drives us to the turnpike and we get out and we hitchhiked to California. And yeah. And I think what we had going for us, I was 14, she was 15. We were just young enough that we still looked like girls. Mm-hmm. So most people were decent to us. We had a couple of run-ins. Nothing bad happened, thank God, but we did have a couple of run-ins. And I called my mom from Kansas, and my mom knew me well enough to know that I wasn't going to come home. I said, I'm going to California. She said, okay, here's my credit card. Promise me you're going to call me every day. Huh. Makes me emotional. And so I know you're alive. And if anything happens, you're hungry, you need a place to sleep, use my credit card. And I called my mom every day. And it was back in, when was it? Was 80 something, maybe 79, 80, 81, somewhere in there. And I could figure it out. Wait, I was born in 66, 76, 10, yeah, it must have been 80, 81. My mom, meanwhile, is like trying to find us a place to stay, right? So she's like calling everybody she knows in all these different states and telling them to call people and my grandmother and my mom's friends and this and that. But this was the 80s, the early 80s. So people had a phone. Most of those phones did not even have if it was busy, it was busy.
Yeah.
And maybe they had an answering machine. So they're getting to people, but we're already gone. Because what we had done was we got picked up by a trucker at one point and they CB each other ahead of time. So they'd be like, we've got these two girls, they're going to California. Who's going west? Who can pick them up at blah, blah, blah truck stop? So we really stuck our thumbs out maybe 3 times the entire time, including that one time on the turnpike. So then we get to San Francisco and it's cold. It's summer and it's cold.
Summer.
Yeah. And we decide to go down to LA, and we do. We go down to LA. We're hanging out in Malibu. Actually hung out with, what the heck is his name? Oh man, his dad was a big movie star and we partied at his house. Griffith, oh man, I think his dad's name was Ryan something. I have to look it up. But in any case, we hung out there for a couple of days. And like back then, this sounds so crazy, right? The kids had the run of things back then, but kids did have the run of things, especially like rich kids, and these kids were in Malibu were rich. And, I don't know where his dad was, if he was off shooting a movie or whatever it was, but I want to say Griffith. Anyway, the name will come to me. And we hung out there for a couple of days and then it was like time to move on. And then I think at this point, because we had slowed down for a couple of days, my grandmother was able to arrange for us to go to stay with a friend of hers who lived in San Diego. So we show up at this old lady's house, as far as I'm concerned,
Mm-hmm.
and she was so nice. I mean, when you think about it, like literally just opening up her home to, for all intents and purposes, for two delinquent girls. And we stayed with her for 3 weeks. I mean, again, this also makes me emotional because just the generosity of
Yeah.
someone
You'll always
doing,
remember that.
oh my God. And yeah. And after about 3 weeks, my mom, we were doing the visit San Diego. We went to the zoo. We went to the beaches. We went, and like did the touristy stuff. And my mom, after about 3 weeks, was like, okay, what do you think? Time to come home? And I was like, well, yeah, but I can't come home without Mara because she doesn't have a home to go to. And my mom's like, I know. There are 2 tickets at the airport. So come on. So that's what we did. We went back, flew back to Detroit at this point, and we were the first kids to ever get away from DeSisto and not have to go back. And my mother had made a deal with Mara's dad that she would take Mara's guardianship, which she did. And I ended up, because I had broken probation, right? This was like part of my probation that I go to this boarding school, and I had broken it by leaving. I ended up for a month in major juvenile detention, like lockup with the thieves and the murderers and the prostitutes.
Wow.
And yeah. And I, with the whole lock the door and all of that. Little one bed, a desk, the wires in the windows, the whole deal. And I was there for a month, and a lot of the things were going on behind the scenes. I didn't know what was going on, but I learned about them later through my mom. And she had meanwhile hired a lawyer. She's like, this is ridiculous. My daughter does not belong in jail. Let's get her out of there. So then they took me out of that and they put me in this home for neglected girls, which was like an hour and a half outside of Detroit. And meanwhile, Mara's living in my home. She's going to a private school. And, I'm in this home for neglected girls. And my mom would come out, and every weekend she'd come out for a visit, and she'd always bring these huge baskets of all these wonderful things to eat and care packages for me and for the other girls. And that was also not so great for them because I was obviously not a neglected child. And so apparently the judge who had sentenced me to go to the school and then had put me in jail, apparently my dad had a friendship with him or something. And then this judge goes on vacation, and while he's on vacation, that's when my mom is able to get me out of there. And I go back home, and then life kind of starts. And I remember the turning point of that was, so Mara and my mom never really got along. Mara got along really well with my stepdad, who I barely knew, I have to say. But Mara and my mom never really got along. So Mara was really smart, but she wasn't doing well in school. And my mom had always been like, look, I've got one job. That's to make sure you have a roof and food on the, roof over your head, food on the table. You've got one job. That's to get decent grades in school. That's it. And that always seemed like a fair deal to me. So even though I was hard-headed, you could appeal to my logical side on these things.
Yeah.
And my mom always kind of got me. And so she also knew, give you an example. One day, both of my parents, my dad was a Harvard graduate. My mom was a sort of scrappy, self-made entrepreneur. But both
had grown, get it from.
Yeah. And both had grown up very kind of like, this is how things are done. So when I brought home a C one day, my dad, I can remember sitting on the couch, literally with my arms crossed, while he berates me. This is ridiculous. I went to Harvard, and you're bringing me home a C's and this. Now my mother sat me on the kitchen counter and took my face in her hands. And she's like, Annie, you're so smart. You're so beautiful. You have so much potential. And you are just better than a C. By the time she gets done doing all this, I'm crying. I'm like, I'll try, Mama. I'll try to get better grades, right? But with my dad's approach, it was just like, fuck you. I don't need, that I don't give a shit that you went to Harvard.
At all.
No, not at all.
That's where the authoritarian comes in. It's like punishment.
Yes.
How dare you? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And it was like an affront to him. It was like, it has nothing to do with you.
It's the
I
ego.
didn't feel like math, right? I didn't like my
Yeah.
math class.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So then one day there's a big blowout between Mara and my mom. And my mom says, do you care about school? And Mara says, no, I don't care. And my mom says, if you don't care, you got to go. And I begged her to stay. I'm like, just go tell her you care. And my stepfather begged her to just say she cared, but she wouldn't do it. She packed up her stuff and she left. And part of the court order for me was I had to continue to see a therapist. So I was seeing a therapist once a week, and usually I would walk there and back. And when I came out of the therapy session this time, my mom and my stepdad were waiting in the car, and they were looking at me. My mom was looking at me. She was so worried that I was going to leave again. And she didn't want to show me she was worried. She's kind of like smiling.
Hmm.
And I got in the car, I got in the back, and I said, I'm not going to leave. And for me, it was, I was done. I was done running. Yeah, and that's that little chapter of my life.
Yeah, I feel like that can be, I think you should write a book about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Add that to your, tell your accomplishments, because as you were telling that story, I was like visualizing it in my head
Yeah,
about
yeah.
like, hitchhiking. I do want to ask, when you were going through like the whole hitchhiking and then getting into random vans, like, how did you have that courage? Unless it's just like, the world was different back in the day. But like for me personally, like I wouldn't get into someone's van. So I'm curious to see like your thought process on that and
Yeah,
how you felt.
totally. First of all, the world was different back then.
Yeah, yeah.
Like hitchhiking in the 70s was no big deal. My dad picked up, my straight laced dad would pick up hitchhikers when we were in the car. It was the 70s. Like that's how people got around if they didn't have a car. You hitchhiked.
No
People used to
Uber.
do it all. No. People used to hitchhike all the time. You'd hitchhike to a party. You'd hitchhike home from a party. That's how people
Oh,
got around, right? So there
yeah.
was that. There was also that, I truly grew up at the time where like you're on the weekends or in the summer, you would leave the house after breakfast and you wouldn't come home until it was dark. Done. Like nobody asked, what'd you do all day? Where are you? Where have you been? Check in every 10 minutes, check in once in a, nobody did any of that. We were
You
just
have to
like
find my
running
friends.
wild. Yeah. And then we would go,
So we have like find my friends now.
right. Oh, we didn't have any of that. And we would
Yeah,
go, we
yeah.
would like go on adventures. We would get on buses and go places and do things. And our parents had no idea where we were. And that was okay. But like nobody's parents knew where their kids were.
I
It
mean,
was
my
normal.
I mean, my parents didn't know where I was either. I didn't have fun. Well, I'm not that young, but like, yeah, when I was a teenager, they couldn't like find me or anything like that.
Right.
They would just assume like, well, actually, one time, I grew up in New Jersey, and I think yeah, I decided to like run to New York with my friends. I was like 14 years old. And then, my mom found out like I think a month later, and then I was like grounded. But she couldn't obviously track me. I was like, yeah, I'm out of friends, just
Right.
hanging out, and then literally
Exactly.
getting on a bus to New York.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, that was, so I wasn't, and also, as I said, we were, for the most part, the truckers were calling ahead. So we weren't really hitchhiking all that much. We
Hmm.
did have a couple of run-ins. We had one run-in with a guy with a van, in the middle of nowhere. I don't know where the heck we were, if it was Iowa or something. It was just flat and cornfields for as far as you could see. And he
Yeah.
had picked us up and I was sitting up in the passengers. Oh no, he said I could drive back to this. So I was like, cool.
Are you still
He's like,
14?
yeah, I'm still 14. This is the first time we're hitchhiking to California, right? And so I'm like, excellent. He says, if you drive, I will, I'll take you further. I was like, okay. So I'm driving, and all of a sudden, I'm having a good time. The radio's on, and all of that, and all of a sudden I hear, Anne, pull over, pull over. And I turn around, I look back, and I see her, like kind of splayed out. Look, and I look at him, and I look at her, and I pull over, and I'm like, did he try and touch? And so I'm literally yelling at this guy, like, how, you bad, and then he's like, I'm sorry. And then he asked her to drive. We fall for it. I mean, this is how stupid and naive we were, right? So we fall for it. So then he does the same thing to me. And I was like, okay, that's enough of that. And then we stopped and then we had to hitchhike again. But that was okay. That was some, I don't remember anything around it, so I'm sure nothing happened. And then one time, one of the truckers back then used to have expense accounts. I don't know if they still do.
You
But
said
back,
what?
expense accounts.
Yeah.
So they could just expense a hotel room, they could expense meals. So we were fine. We were not ever hungry. Plus they had sleepers. So we could sleep
Yeah.
in the back of those things as well. So we were totally fine, to be very honest. And except that these truckers had gotten us a hotel room, had taken us out to dinner. Then I had a weird feeling about them. So I
Oh
put a
God.
chair under the door,
Uh-huh.
and sure enough, they start trying to get into the room. And they got really angry. Luckily, we did have the chair. We told them we were calling the police, which I don't even know how I thought that was going to pan out as two runaways. But again, I don't know, maybe I was just like really naive. I think I was really naive when I was 14. And first of all, you think you're invincible. You think you're
Yeah.
immortal. And you just don't think anything bad could possibly happen to you. That's for other people, but it's not for you.
Yeah, you're right. That is actually very true. I'm trying to think back when I was 14, I would do a lot of stuff that I like just really just pretty much risked my life. And just like, yeah, I like as you were saying, it's like, yeah, I think back at it. I mean, I didn't like hitchhike, obviously, but like there were some things and some situations that I put myself in where I was like, wow, how am I not dead at this point? So yeah, you're right. Like the way the brain is, it probably just yeah, I think I'm asking you this question with my 29-year-old brain, where it's like the frontal lobe is already like fully formed, and I
Right,
know I'm not invincible.
right,
Yeah,
right.
I noticed. I'm like after the age of 25, I'm like, why am I actually scared of things? Like I used to be so fearless, and now I'm
Yeah,
just like,
because now you know
yeah,
what can happen. Exactly. Right.
exactly, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, I do want to ask, like, how did you get into acting?
So I didn't get along with my dad very well, as I've
Mm-hmm.
mentioned. And
Yeah.
at one point, I wanted to be a lawyer at one point. I was sort of torn between being a lawyer and being a psychiatrist for the deaf children, because I used to be able to speak
Mm.
sign language.
Oh, okay.
And I wanted to go to university. And when I was about 16 something, when you start applying to universities, he's like, I'm not paying for that. And so I thought, okay, well, then that frees me up to do what I really want to do, which is be an actor. And that's kind of how that happened. So then my grandmother helped me. I moved to Chicago, and that's where my grandma lived. And I started going to acting school. So I've been an actor basically since the time I was 17, 18 years old. Yeah.
That's awesome. And like I actually fun fact, I actually tried myself for like a second, but I couldn't like after I was like turned down by one audition, I like lost all of my like confidence. And like I was 17 then. I did some
Yeah.
acting classes in New York, and then I we did like an audition for like a commercial whatever. And then as soon as I had to do my like monologue, I just completely shut down and with my anxiety, and I was just like, yeah, I don't think I can do this.
For everybody, and that's okay.
Yeah.
A lot of people think it is for them. There's a lot of
Yeah.
competition, but yeah.
I feel like I mean right now I'm more confident. I think cuz like when I was like a teenager, my confidence level was just not there, and that came from like bullying, and that's a whole other story. But like I feel like with my confidence now, I mean if you think about like I'm always on camera. I did YouTube. I was doing comedy sketches. Like I built that confidence. And so I feel like if I were to be have my confidence now and then did that, then I would
Well,
probably
it's
maybe be
not
in a
too late.
different
I relaunched my career when I
you
was
know
47.
I honestly like
This is
think that's
literally
because
what I do.
yeah,
Justina,
my
I literally have a program called Get Better Roles where I help people who are trained. So you have to
yeah,
kind of, trained
yeah,
and have some experience to understand their brand, know how to market themselves, understand how to network so that they can get more opportunities to better
yeah.
roles. Yeah.
I have a friend who's actually she's in LA, and she does like a lot of acting, and she's like so good. Yeah, so I'm like I love just watching her sing and all like these. I'm trying to think of what was that called. If you know what the this production company that she's in all of these like short films, Starman.
No, short films, yeah, there are a lot of those.
Yeah, yeah. I It's like a pretty well-known one on like I think I found it like 10 like years back maybe on Facebook. It's one of those things where it's like it teaches you a lesson,
Okay.
where it says
Yeah.
like it shows a certain scene and then like so you see, you can't act like that. It's kind of like one of those. But just seeing like her acting skills just like, it's just phenomenal. So she's doing that, which is
Yeah.
fantastic. I say like the only experience I really have was like I was like an extra once. That's really it.
Yeah.
I did theater, but that's it. But yeah, no, I sometimes do think that I'm like it just goes through my mind, and then I like was at one point even like searching acting, like acting classes in Orlando. That's like where I am right now. But yeah, it was just stuff that I would just look into. Cause I'm like I don't, cause I always have these like thoughts in my head that I want to do all this, and then it's just I feel like it's just kind of harder when even though it's not too late. I just think it's like harder when you don't have as like much freedom or time because naturally you're an adult and have to pay rent. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh
Well, then
yeah.
you might be interested in my second program.
I mean, hey, like
Yeah.
I truly believe like the angel numbers universe crossing paths and such. So I feel like, if it's right, it would be, we'll just say like come find me. Cause I mean, in reality, I feel like I rather attract something, if you know what I mean.
I think we often don't even
Yeah.
recognize the opportunities that we attract because
Yeah.
we let our fear get in our way. So when I
Yeah.
returned to acting, I was 47,
Yeah, let's talk
and
about that.
yeah. So I had been a professional actor in America. I was SAG. I was making enough money to have my health insurance paid for by SAG. Didn't have to do a side hustle. And then I met this hot German guy and ended up in Germany.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. And I didn't see a way forward with my acting career because I didn't speak German. And you kind of got to speak the language to be able to act. And so then we had our baby, our son, who's a little bit younger than you, but not much. And I was very wrapped up in that initially. And then when our son was about 2 years old, I had seen a poster somewhere for the American Drama Group in Munich. And so I reached out to them and I said, I'm an American actor. I would love to audition. He said, yes, come in. So I had an interview with him, the owner, and I auditioned. And he's like, welcome aboard. Welcome to the American Drama Group. And I was thrilled. And then he pulls out this calendar and starts showing me the touring dates. And I was like, there's no way. I can't tour. I have a baby and I'm a mom and I'm a wife and there's no way I can't do that. And so I was very embarrassed for having not checked into this myself and wasting his time. And I stand up and I'm just about to close the door behind me and I lean back in and I say, hey, Grantley. His name was Grantley. You don't happen to know anybody in Munich who could help me, do you? And he gave me two names. And those two people became pivotal in launching my voiceover career, which I had a great voiceover career in Germany. And that led to presenting work. But it was lucrative, it was fun, it was flexible. I was known for showing up to studios with my baby and my dog, but it didn't scratch that itch. It wasn't creatively fulfilling for me. So when my son was about 16, we had a standing movie date. We used to go every Friday to see a movie. And he came to me on Thursday and he's like, Mom, I'd rather hang out with my friends tomorrow. And actually going forward, I don't want to hang out with you anymore on the weekends. And so bittersweet. But I think my husband was doing a golf trip or something. In any case, I had the weekend to myself. And it was the first time I had a chance to really think about, well, what do I want? Because I had not thought about that in terms of me alone in 16 years, because we had a very traditional marriage back then. I was the mom. I was the caretaker. Even though I was working, I was still the one responsible for all that. And even though my son was old enough, I still got him up for school. I still made his breakfast. I still made sure he did his homework, right? I was like very present. And so what I wanted to do was take an acting workshop. So I sat down, I Googled acting workshop Munich English, and it turns out there was one the very next day with one spot open, whipped out my credit card, signed up for it, showed up the next day, and it changed my life. I never looked back. It was like, okay, this is what I've been missing. This is what I need. And then I told my husband I'm going to relaunch my acting career. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm going to do it. And what I did do was that it was very obvious to me that I was rusty and I needed to get training to get my skills back in shape. So I had a couple of choices around that. I could fly to LA, fly to New York, fly to London, and take these workshops, which would be obviously extremely expensive. Flight, hotel, food, all of that, plus the workshop, plus the time away from home. So that would have limited me to once or twice a year. And that wasn't really a great option. And the other option, and here's where the revelation kind of is, the obstacle, the problem was the solution. I needed to have acting workshops in English in Munich. So I had to figure that out. And that's what I started to do. So I brought in coaches from New York, LA, London, and I started doing workshops once, sometimes even twice a month. And then I was arranging workshops in between with the actors who had taken those workshops so that we could work on what we had learned. And what very quickly happened, my original goal was just to get training at a relatively affordable price. But what very quickly happened was I got the training. It was free. I was building a community, and I was earning between $1,000 to $2,000 per workshop, which was amazing.
Yeah.
So then a year and a half of that, but my main goal was just the training. So I wasn't not being lured away by the other things. So my main goal was to get the training, and as soon as I felt like it was, back in place, then I was going to launch my career. So that's what I did. So about a year and a half after that, I started to really seriously. I looked for an agent, got on the casting director's radar, started to do all the things that I had done as a young woman in Chicago. But there's a couple of things. I had a lot of luck. I knew people who knew people, and, I was young. Doors open for people who are young that aren't necessarily open for you when now I was close to 50. So they're not necessarily open for you at that point. So I realized that whatever luck I had been relying on, and I didn't even realize that I was relying on luck until I took a good look at my strategy, which I had no strategy. And I also knew I had to get over my limiting belief, which was that I was too old. So I realized that I was afraid. I think we are often afraid, and that the difference is a lot of people will let their fear stand in front of them and bully them. And I said, and I had done that in my life, certainly. But I said, you are welcome to walk beside me, but you are not going to stand in front of me. And I'm going to do it anyway. And if I fall flat on my face, so be it. But I'm going to do it. And I still had these limiting beliefs around my age. So I knew I needed to find a way to get over that. So I became a life and career coach to get over my own limiting beliefs, which helped greatly. And it made me realize, it's kind of like an epiphany moment, that if I could just adopt somebody else's strategies and framework, then I could shorten my timeline for how long it would take me to figure out all this stuff. Because I have no doubt that I can figure stuff out one way or another. I'm the kind of person who asks, how can we do this? Instead of, like in German, they say, das geht nicht. That doesn't work. That won't work. But it would have taken me a long time. And when I realized that I could shorten my timeline so much by using somebody else's strategies and framework, I was like, aha, what else don't I know? Oh, a lot, because what I realized that I didn't know was the business of being an actor. I felt confident in my skills of it as an actor, but I didn't feel confident in knowing how to market myself as an actor. And before you can market yourself, you have to understand what your brand is. And once you understand that, that determines how you market yourself and who you network with. So for me, I very quickly began to study with other people, business coaches, other acting coaches, and that I had always done. Right? That was how I started this all. I would always get training for my skills, but it had never occurred to me before that to get training for the business skills. And once it had, then I got them everywhere. And then I started to develop my own system, which is based on a 5-pillar framework. So mindset, branding, marketing, networking, and community. And these pillars all work together in tandem, but you can think of mindset and branding as the tentpole pillars of this framework, because mindset is 80% of everything. The rest, the 20%, is just mechanics and mentorship. And if you get the mindset in place, that will help you to get the rest of the skills you need, because you won't get the skills if you don't believe that getting the skills will help you. So then you have to understand what it is that you're selling. I am a product, just like this cup is a product, right? I mean, and so to give you an example, so I play high status women who are morally ambiguous with a fierce heart.
I love that. I know you're a doctor in one of them. I do want to watch that movie. You got to tell me where to find it.
Yeah, it's on Netflix. I don't know,
Coming?
maybe. No, The Coming. Oh, I don't even know. I think that's making the.
Because I'm really into like psychiatric horror films.
Yeah, of course
Like
you are.
that's some of my.
Yeah. Well, psychiatric, mentally a badass. There you go. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You're so right. That's what.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like some of my favorites. So I'm like, that's so cool. I want to watch that. And you're like the doctor in it. I'm like,
I
was
play
looking
the
all over, I couldn't
director of
find
this
it.
insane asylum because it's still doing the festival circuit.
Wait, when did that 2023? Okay, can I know there is like a festival thing? Because I was an extra in a show that never really got through the network, but there wasn't a festival in New York.
Well, there are tons of festivals.
Yeah.
And a lot of times a film like this one will do the festival circuit. So it's doing a bunch of different
that
festivals.
Word, but I forgot what it meant.
A circuit is just.
Well, I know what a circuit means. Yeah, yeah.
Right,
I think I remember hearing people. But do you think it would eventually get on these like platforms that I can?
Probably eventually on Amazon or something. Yeah, generally.
I really want to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a fun film to do.
So a person that's listening to this is most likely someone who may not have as much, it could be, of course, an actor, hence the SEO of the title, who may have like those limiting beliefs or who may not have like the courage that you had, and may feel like they are struggling. So like what's advice that you would provide them?
Well, first of all, just do it. Start messy. Yeah, take those first few steps, because once you get on the path, you are going to meet other people on that path. And what you originally thought was the destination, that might not even be it. But you won't know until you get going. So you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable so that you can expand the boundaries, because your big dreams are not waiting for you inside your comfort zone. You got to get outside of that. But the good news is every time you take a step outside of that comfort zone, you are expanding the boundaries of your comfort zone. So what scared you yesterday now lies behind you. And sure, there might be new things that scare you tomorrow, but there's like this flywheel of results. And it starts with belief. So whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. But if you don't believe that you can, then act as if you do. Do the actions that you would do if you believed it. So that belief, it leads to intention, which leads to an action, which leads to confidence, which leads to results. And the flywheel just keeps getting bigger and stronger and stronger. But also, I truly believe that whatever your passion is, what your curiosity is, that is the key to finding your purpose. And I think so many people, all we want as human beings on this earth is to matter.
Yeah.
And so many people let their fear, other people's fears, keep them from doing that thing that is what they were put on this earth to do. And I see that again and again and again with girlfriends, men, just people around my age, right, who are in their 50s, 60s, who have been working at a job they hate, and they have to pay rent, so they don't see a way out of it. And I always could see the way out.
Yeah.
It starts with, honestly, this is Passion Project to Pro. It is a program where I literally lead people from ideation. So whatever that spark is, whatever that curiosity is, to figure out what kind of an event makes the most sense for you, whether that's online, a retreat, a supper club, a walk in 5 in the morning, whatever that looks like. Help you find the experts, influencers, coaches, whoever you need to make that work. Then help you find the participants. There's like all these different templates for it. Help you figure out what you need to charge for it. So that by the 7th week, you are now ready to launch your event. And then there's like a 2-week break, and we come back together the last time, and we do a debrief. What worked, what didn't work, what are you going to do differently, so that by the time you finish the program, you've already earned back your investment. And you've taken those steps. So you got that flywheel going, that flywheel of results, and you've now got the confidence to know you can do it again.
Yeah.
So I think so many times, especially in this day and age, we are told, your passion, you can be a coach. Your curiosity, teach it, right? And I'm telling you, I've coached with some of the biggest names in the coaching industry, Sonny Lenarduzzi, Amy Porterfield, James Wedmore, and always in the communities of these groups, there's somebody who will post at least once a week. I'm really dealing with imposter syndrome, guys. Anybody else? And then there'll be like 97 comments. Me too, me too, me too.
Me too.
Yeah. And hey, everybody has it once in a while. But one of the reasons that they have it is they've been told that you only need to stay 2 steps ahead of somebody else in order to teach something. But most people are going to be looking over their shoulder to see if somebody's catching up to them if they're only 2 steps ahead. So the way I turned my passion for acting back into my profession was literally by getting the training I needed to become a professional actor again. And building that community, building that authority, I had to fight to say that, hey guys, don't look at me as an authority. That person over there is the coach. I just organize this. I want to learn just like you. I want the feedback just like you. But the authority comes, and one day people will start to ask you, why don't you do a workshop about this or what? And you'll know when you're ready to start teaching. But in the meantime, you will have a way to make your passion a meaningful, impactful, and income-generating part of your life. Because of what a lot of the people in these groups do is they go and they get that training, but they're paying for it. And they're not doing it in a way that they're actually building a community around what they're interested in. They're going to this coach and to that coach, and they're paying it and paying it, paying it. Whereas they could be doing it the other way and be getting paid to organize, to curate these coaches.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's trying to find like the right, like the flow of it. It's like I was trying to have like a certain thought process, and it's like not coming to me. But when I was listening, it made me think like you're trying to pretty much change the way of like, instead of there's a way to make an income from it instead of just like your investment never comes back. You can also make money from it. And I love how I feel like what you're
and
doing
you
is
don't
super
have to be the
unique.
expert, right?
Exactly.
You can turn what you love into what you do without having to be an expert or an influencer or a coach.
Right. And a lot of people don't have that kind of, they think in their head that they can't. Like, oh yeah, your passion is just like a hobby. But you're saying no, like it could be income generated. And I mean, hey, both of us. Yay. So thank you. I want to say thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
on here.
Yeah.
And having, that courage of also telling your story, because I know like it can be challenging sometimes and on a public, platform. So I want to say thank you so much for sharing that for my audience and everything you do.
Thank you so much, Justine, for allowing me to come on and share my story and listening so patiently. I don't know if anybody wants to get in touch, you can find me at actboldtraining.com, or I can give you my Linktree. That's probably the easiest. It's Linktree, act_bold. And if the idea of creating a workshop for yourself, if that sparks something for you, if you want to learn how to forage edible fauna in your neighborhood, or you want to learn how to crochet your own clothes or raise chickens, whatever that thing is, I have a free workbook that will get you up and running with that. So check out actboldtraining.com, look to Passion Project to Pro, and download the free workbook.
Yeah, awesome. And I'll have all of those links in the description for them.
Amazing. Thank you.
Of course. So, for everyone's listening, hope you guys have a good rest of your day and stay tuned for next week's episode.